The truth was hiding right in his own home. What this millionaire discovered will make you rethink love, family, and success. Before we dive into this incredible story, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. I was not born wealthy. I was born in a room that smelled of damp walls and broken promises. My mother stitched clothes until her fingers bled. My father disappeared before I learned how to spell his name. I grew up with hunger scratching at my ribs, with classmates laughing at my worn shoes, with nights so cold that even hope felt frozen. I promised myself I would never beg life for mercy again. I worked in warehouses where sweat soaked through my shirt. I studied under flickering streetlights. I built my first business on a borrowed laptop and stubborn faith. Failure came quickly. Partners betrayed me. Investors smiled and then shut their doors. I remember the sting of humiliation, the metallic taste of defeat in my mouth. Then she walked into my chaos. Eleanor. She was not impressed by my ambition. She was moved by my pain. She brought me tea when I forgot to eat. She reminded me that wealth without kindness was poverty in disguise. When my second company collapsed, I broke. I shouted. I blamed the world. She held my face in her trembling hands and whispered, "Build your character before you build your empire." Those words burned deeper than any loss. Years passed. I rose. Slowly, relentlessly, the warehouses became offices. The rented desk became a tower of glass. My name began appearing in magazines beside the word billionaire. But success has a cruel habit. It steals time. It stole me from my children. One evening, a strange doubt crept into my mind about the nanny we had hired. I left the house quietly, pretending to travel for business. Instead, I returned unnoticed. The hallway was silent. The air smelled of warm milk and lavender soap. I expected negligence, carelessness. Instead, I heard laughter. Soft, genuine. I saw her kneeling on the carpet, teaching my son to tie his shoes. My daughter rested against her shoulder as she read a story about courage. And then she said something that shattered me. "Your father works hard because he loves you more than money." I stood there, unseen, a billionaire with everything, yet suddenly ashamed of how little of myself I had given. In that quiet doorway, watching my children glow under her gentle patience, I realized the truth was not about her loyalty. It was about mine. And as I stepped forward to reveal myself, my son looked up and said something that stopped my heart. He looked straight at me and asked, "Daddy, are you staying tonight? Or are you leaving again?" His voice was soft, not accusing, just tired of hoping. The question pierced deeper than any business loss. My daughter ran toward me, wrapping her small arms around my legs. She smelled of baby shampoo and warm cookies. "I told her you would come," as she said proudly. Eleanor stood behind them, silent. Her eyes held no anger, only truth. I had built towers of steel, but I had neglected the fragile architecture of love. That night, I did not open my laptop. I sat on the carpet. I listened to their stories about school and scraped knees. For the first time in years, I felt richer than my bank account. Days later, I walked into my office and did something my board could not understand. I stepped down as CEO, not to quit, but to rebuild. I restructured the company to run without my constant presence. I chose balance over ego, purpose over applause. Investors whispered that I was losing my edge. Competitors smiled, waiting for my fall. But Eleanor squeezed my hand and said, "Legacy is not measured in profits. It is measured in people." Those words became my compass. I began funding schools in neighborhoods like the one where I grew up. I created scholarships for children whose shoes looked like mine once did. Success returned, stronger than before. Not because I chased it, but because I aligned it with meaning. At a charity gala years later, my son stood on stage beside me. Confident, kind. He spoke about responsibility, about presence. The audience applauded him, not me. And in that moment, I understood the true return on investment. Yet life was preparing one more test. As we drove home that night, my phone rang with news that threatened everything I had rebuilt. It was my chief financial officer. His voice was shaking. "Our largest partner has withdrawn. The markets are reacting. If we do not respond immediately, we could lose half the company by morning." The city lights blurred outside the car window. So bright. So fragile. Years ago, I would have ordered an emergency meeting. I would have abandoned dinner. I would have chosen panic over presence. My son was still talking about his speech. My daughter leaned against Eleanor, half asleep. Eleanor looked at me. She did not speak. She did not need to. The old fear rose in my chest. The metallic taste returned. The memory of poverty knocking at the door of my past. What if I lost it all? What if balance was a luxury I could not afford? I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. Leather seats. Faint perfume. The steady breathing of my children. I answered calmly. "Prepare a statement. We will address it at dawn." The silence on the other end felt stunned. I ended the call. That night, I tucked my children into bed myself. I kissed their foreheads. I stayed. At sunrise, I faced the board. I did not beg. I did not threaten. I told them the truth. We built this company on resilience. If one partner leaves, we innovate. If the market doubts us, we prove them wrong. Fear does not drive this empire. Values do. There was tension. Whispers. Doubt in familiar eyes. Then Eleanor entered quietly with a file she had prepared overnight. Inside were proposals I had once dismissed. Community-based investments. Long-term ethical partnerships. She had studied my business as deeply as she had studied my heart. As I opened the file, I realized something shocking. The solution was not in cutting costs. It was in changing direction entirely. And if I approved what she had designed, it would risk everything we had left. The room felt smaller as I turned the pages. Projected losses in the first year. Criticism from shareholders. A complete shift in strategy. It was bold. Uncomfortable. Terrifying. Eleanor met my eyes. Short-term fear, as she said quietly. Or long-term integrity? The board waited. Some men avoided my gaze. Others watched like predators sensing weakness. I remembered the warehouse floor. The smell of dust and sweat. The promise I made to the boy I once was. Never beg life for mercy again. But also never betray your values. My voice felt steady when I finally spoke. We move forward with this plan. Gasps circled the table. One director slammed his pen down. "You are gambling the company." "No," ER replied. I am protecting its soul. The vote was divided. Tension crackled like dry air before a storm. By a margin of 1, the decision passed. The next months were brutal. Headlines questioned my sanity. Stock prices dipped. Former allies distanced themselves. I woke before sunrise, heart pounding. Fear whispered old memories of hunger and humiliation. Yet every evening, I came home. I helped with homework. I listened. I stayed present. Eleanor worked beside me, refining partnerships built on trust instead of greed. Slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Communities responded. Small investors rallied. Employees worked with renewed loyalty. Profit margins stabilized. Then grew. Not explosive. Not flashy. But steady. Sustainable. One afternoon, months later, my phone buzzed again during a family dinner. I almost ignored it. But the name on the screen made my breath stop. It was the very partner who had abandoned us. I answered. His tone was different now. Humbled. We want back in. On your terms. I looked at my children laughing across the table. At Eleanor's quiet strength. And I realized this was not about revenge. It was about redemption. I stood slowly, phone in hand. As everyone turned to look at me, I stepped away from the table, but I did not leave the room. I wanted my children to see this moment. The man on the other end cleared his throat. We misjudged you. Your new model is attracting attention. We are prepared to reinvest. Larger than before. Larger than before. Years ago, those words would have intoxicated me. They would have felt like victory. Now they felt like a test. I could demand control. I could punish his doubt. I could remind him how quickly he ran when fear appeared. Instead, I remembered something Eleanor once told me while washing dishes in a small first apartment. Power shows who you are when nobody can stop you. I returned to the table and put the phone on speaker. My son looked curious. My daughter leaned closer. Eleanor watched quietly, her fingers wrapped around a glass of water. I spoke calmly. We will accept partnership only if you commit to our community initiatives. Education funding. Employee equity. Transparent governance. There was silence. Heavy. Calculating. That will reduce margins, he replied. It will increase meaning, I said. Another pause. Then, slowly, he agreed. Not enthusiastically, but respectfully. When the call ended, my son asked, "Did we win?" I knelt beside him. We did not win against someone, I said softly. We won against fear. Eleanor's eyes shimmered with quiet pride. In that moment, I understood something deeper than profit. Wealth is not the number in a bank account. It is the courage to choose values when comfort is at stake. Months later, our company was stronger than it had ever been. Not louder, not more arrogant, just stronger. At a global summit, I was invited to speak about ethical leadership. The lights were bright, the hall enormous. Cameras focused on my face. I spoke about warehouses and betrayal, about stepping down, about choosing family over panic. And then I said her name, Eleanor, the woman who transformed a millionaire into a man. The applause was thunderous. But as I stepped off the stage, my assistant rushed toward me, pale and breathless, holding a message that changed the color of the night. She handed me the phone with trembling fingers. "It is from home," she whispered. My pulse roared in my ears. The message was short. Eleanor had been in a minor accident on her way back from visiting one of our schools. She was conscious, but at the hospital. The bright summit hall suddenly felt distant, meaningless. I left without another word. The drive to the hospital stretched like an eternity. Streetlights flashed across the windshield, each one a reminder of how quickly life can shift. When I entered her room, the sharp scent of antiseptic filled my lungs. She lay there with a small bandage on her forehead, bruised, pale, but smiling when she saw me. "I am fine," she said softly. I sat beside her and took her hand. Warm, fragile, real. For a moment, I saw everything I had almost lost. Not the company, not the investments. Her. She squeezed my fingers. "Do not look at me like that," as she whispered. "I'm not leaving." But fear does not ask permission. It floods quietly. The doctor explained it was not serious. Rest was needed. Nothing more. Relief washed over me so deeply that my knees felt weak. That night, sitting in the dim hospital light, I realized another truth. Success had tested my ambition. Crisis had tested my leadership. But vulnerability was testing my heart. I leaned closer and said, "If tomorrow everything disappears, I will still be grateful. Because you taught me how to build what truly matters." Her eyes filled with tears. Outside the room, I noticed a young father arguing about medical bills. Desperate. Ashamed. I stood slowly. The old version of me would have walked past. The new version could not. And as I stepped toward that stranger, reaching into my jacket, I knew this choice would begin something far bigger than any company I had ever built. I approached him quietly. His voice was cracking as he spoke to the receptionist. "I will find the money. Please just give me time." His daughter sat nearby in a wheelchair, clutching a worn teddy bear. Her eyes were wide with silent fear. I saw myself in that man. Helpless. Cornered by circumstances. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "How much?" I asked gently. He turned, embarrassed, suspicious. When I told him it would be handled, he stared at me as if I had handed him the sky. Tears filled his eyes. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. As I signed the papers, something shifted inside me. This was different from charity galas, different from headlines. This was human. When I returned to Eleanor's room, she was watching me with knowing eyes. "You saw him," she said softly. I nodded. I remembered who I used to be. She smiled faintly. "Then do not forget again." That night, sitting beside her hospital bed, an idea formed with quiet power. What if hospitals in struggling neighborhoods never had to turn fathers away? What if medical fear did not destroy dignity? By morning, I had called my legal team. Not about profit. Not about expansion, about building a foundation that would cover emergency care for families who had nowhere else to go. Some advisors warned me. It is too large. It will drain resources. It is not sustainable. I listened. Then I remembered the smell of damp walls from my childhood. The sound of my mother stitching through the night. Sustainability is built on courage. Within months, the first hospital partnership launched. Bills were paid quietly. No cameras. No speeches. Just relief in tired eyes. At the opening ceremony, Eleanor stood beside me, still healing but radiant. My children held the ribbon. As it was cut, applause echoed through the hallway. But I felt something else. Not pride. Responsibility. Because if one hospital needed this, how many more did? And as a journalist stepped forward with a question that could expose everything we were planning next, I took a slow breath and prepared to answer. The journalist lifted her microphone. "Is this a strategy to repair your public image?" she asked. "Or a calculated move to expand influence?" The question was sharp, designed to provoke. Cameras leaned closer. For a brief second, the old instinct returned. Defend. Impress. Dominate the narrative. But I looked at the hallway instead. A nurse guiding an elderly woman. A mother kissing her child's forehead. Eleanor standing beside our children, her hand resting over her heart. I answered slowly. If influence is measured by how many people stand taller because you stood with them, then yes. I want influence. Murmurs moved through the crowd. I know what it feels like to choose between rent and medicine, I continued. No family should have to measure love against survival. The journalist lowered her microphone slightly. "And how far will this go?" she pressed. "As far as it must," I replied. The headline the next morning surprised everyone. Not scandal. Not suspicion. It read, "Billionaire redefines wealth, investors called again." New partners emerged. Young entrepreneurs reached out, asking how to build businesses with conscience. But the true reward came quietly. One evening, months later, my son walked into my study. He placed a small drawing on my desk. It showed a hospital, a large heart above it, and our family standing outside holding hands. He looked up at me and said, "When I grow up, I want to be rich like you." I smiled gently. "Rich how?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Rich enough to help without being asked." My throat tightened. In that simple sentence, I heard the echo of every struggle, every betrayal, every lesson Eleanor had planted in my stubborn heart. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered. Beautiful. Fragile. My phone vibrated once more on the desk. A message from an international leader requesting a private meeting about expanding our foundation globally. I looked at my son, at the drawing in my hand, and I realized this next decision would not only shape my company, it would shape the world he grows up in. I stared at the message for a long moment. Global expansion. Different laws. Different politics. Different risks. Power at that level does not come without pressure. I imagined boardrooms filled with leaders who smiled publicly and negotiated privately. I imagined compromise disguised as diplomacy. Eleanor stepped into the study quietly. She saw my face and understood. "Bigger stage," as she said softly. "Bigger consequences," I replied. She walked to the window and looked at the city below. "Do you remember?" she asked. "The night you almost quit after your second failure?" I nodded. "You said the world was too hard." "It was," I answered. "And I told you hard things shape strong hearts." She turned toward me. This is another shaping moment. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders again. Not the weight of money, the weight of example. If I stepped into that meeting, I would need to protect our mission without letting ambition corrupt it. If I refused, opportunities to help millions might disappear. My son's drawing was still in my hand. A hospital. A heart. Our family. Simple. Clear. I picked up the phone and typed a reply. I accept the meeting, but on one condition: full transparency, community representation at the table. I pressed send before fear could argue. Within minutes, a confirmation arrived. The meeting would take place in 2 weeks. International press already whispering. As I closed my laptop, Eleanor stepped closer and rested her forehead against mine. No matter how large the stage becomes, she said, do not shrink your values. I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of home. Outside, the city continued its restless rhythm. Inside, my heart beat with a different rhythm now. Not driven by hunger. Not driven by ego. Driven by purpose. 2 weeks later, as I walked toward the grand doors of that global summit hall, cameras flashing, leaders waiting, I realized this was not just another opportunity. It was a crossroads. And as the doors began to open, revealing the faces of those who would test everything I stand for, the doors opened slowly. A long polished table stretched beneath crystal lights. Flags from different nations stood behind men and women whose decisions shaped millions of lives. Their smiles were practiced, measured. I felt the old warehouse boy inside me stir again. Not afraid. Aware. A chair waited at the center. I did not rush to sit. Instead, I greeted each leader with steady eye contact. Firm handshake. No performance. The first proposal was generous. Massive funding. Global recognition. Fast expansion across continents. But the clauses were hidden in elegant language. Control over board decisions. Brand ownership. Influence over which communities qualified for aid. It was subtle. Strategic, helpful on the surface. Restrictive underneath. One leader leaned forward. With our structure, you could triple your reach within a year. Triple. The word echoed. My mind calculated numbers. Lives impacted. Hospitals built. But then I pictured a father at a reception desk, begging for time. I pictured my son's drawing. Anna Leonard's voice. Do not shrink your values. I cleared my throat. Expansion without independence is not growth, I said calmly. It is dependence. A few brows lifted. We are open to partnership, I continued. But our foundation must remain governed by community representatives. No political preference. No selective access. The room cooled. One advisor whispered to another. A woman across the table studied me carefully. You are declining substantial leverage, she said. I am protecting trust, I replied. Silence followed. Long. Heavy. This was the moment. Accept their terms and gain speed. Or hold the line and risk isolation. My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. We will not trade integrity for acceleration. Chairs shifted. Then, unexpectedly, the woman who had been silent until now spoke. I support his conditions, as she said firmly. Heads turned toward her. If we are truly here to serve people, she continued, then transparency must not threaten us. A murmur spread. The balance was shifting. And as negotiations began to tilt in our favor, my phone vibrated softly in my pocket. A message from Eleanor. 3 simple words. We are watching. I smiled slightly. because I knew she meant more than the live broadcast. She meant my children. She meant the boy I once was. And as the final vote approached, I realized this decision would echo far beyond this room. The final vote was called. Hands rose slowly. Some hesitant. Some confident. I kept my eyes on the woman who had supported me. Anna Lenner, watching from the gallery, her hand over her heart. When the last hand went up, the room exhaled. We had won, not by taking the easy path, not by chasing recognition, but by staying true to values. The contracts were signed. Every clause respected the communities we vowed to serve. The applause that followed was polite, professional, but my heart felt thunderous, because this victory was more than business. It was a lesson for life. Driving home, the city lights blurred past. My children slept in the backseat, oblivious to the world's complexities. Eleanor held my hand, still tired from the long day. I reflected on the journey, the warehouses, the betrayals, the sleepless nights, the empty dinners. Every hardship, every failure, every tear had led to this moment. I whispered quietly to her, "Money cannot define a man. Only choices can." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. At home, I found my sons drawing on the kitchen table. A simple sketch. A hospital. A heart. Our family standing outside, hand in hand. I realized then the truth I had learned over decades. Real wealth is not counted in dollars or shares. It is measured in love given freely, in lives uplifted, in courage to remain honest when shortcuts tempt you, and in the presence you offer to those who matter most. I knelt beside my children and kissed their foreheads. No empire, no headline, no global summit could outweigh this moment. Eleanor whispered, "The world will test you again. But remember, integrity is the one thing no one can take away." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in my bones. And for the first time, I knew. Success without sacrifice of heart is hollow. Power without compassion is empty. And the greatest legacy one can leave is not money, but love, presence, and the courage to do what is right. The city outside continued to pulse with ambition and greed. But inside our home, there was peace. And I promised myself, silently and fiercely, I would never forget it again. The journey had tested everything. It had broken me. It had built me. And it had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. True greatness begins in the heart. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. If it moved you, share it, comment below, and let someone know you were never alone.